Hi everyone. Welcome to another installment of Terrifying Trios. This year, the week of May 19th to May 25th is Travel and Tourism Week. So, our theme this time is travel, and all of these stories concern worst-case scenarios when it comes to taking a trip. Content warning. The following movies and books contain bloody, graphic violence and scenes of death related to strangulation, blunt force trauma, climbing mishaps, claustrophobia-inducing scenes of people trapped in subterranean tunnels, a man hanging by the neck from a rope, characters traveling to literal hell, discussions of child death and pet death, near drownings, murderous underground creatures, bloodthirsty pioneers, and more. Viewer and reader discretion is advised. Also, as usual, spoilers ahead. Our first film is The Descent, a 2005 British horror film that begins with Beth, Juno, and Sarah. The trio of friends get together for a whitewater rafting trip. Afterward, Sarah and her husband Paul are heading home in their car when an accident kills Paul and the couple's daughter, Jessica. Sarah survives, and 1 year later, Holly, Rebecca, and Sam join the original group of three for a spelunking trip somewhere in Appalachia. It quickly becomes clear that things are not quite as they seem on this trip. After the entrance to the cave collapses, trapping the group of six inside, Juno, who planned their route, admits that this isn't actually a fully mapped cave system. Instead, it's unexplored, so no one actually knows the location of the group, and no one is going to show up to rescue them. However, as the group moves forward, they find paintings on the walls and old hiking gear, indicating that people have been here before, so the group presses on, hoping to find an exit. Holly hurries forward when she thinks she catches a glimpse of sunlight, but instead, a sudden fall leads to a broken leg. While four members of the group attempt first aid, Sarah, on her own, sees a pale creature that's disturbingly human-shaped drinking from a pool inside the cave. As the group makes their way further into the network of caverns, they find large quantities of animal bones, and a pale creature attacks them. Because of how they move, low to the ground and not running upright like a human would, the women name these creatures in the cave crawlers. Soon after, Holly is the first to die when a crawler bites her in the throat. Juno tries to stop the theft of Holly's body by more creatures, and she kills one with her pickaxe. But then, given the darkness of the cave and the suddenness of this life-and-death situation, Juno hits Beth in the neck. She is badly wounded, and though she begs Juno for help, pulling a pendant from her, uninjured, neck in the process, Juno hurries away, leaving Beth to die. By this time, Sarah has fallen down a hole and lost consciousness. When she wakes up, she finds that she has fallen into a kind of den. There are human and animal bones all around her, and several crawlers are eating Holly's corpse nearby. Meanwhile, Juno notices markings on the walls that seem to indicate a consistent path, and when she reunites with Rebecca and Sam, Sam explains that the crawlers, given their subterranean existence, seem to be blind, so they don't rely on their eyes to locate prey. They hunt by sound. It's at this point that Sarah encounters Beth, and Beth tells her what happened with Juno. She gives Sarah the pendant she took, and Sarah realizes that Juno was having an affair with her husband Paul, since the pendant was a gift from him. At Beth's request, Sarah kills Beth with a rock so she won't be killed and eaten by crawlers. Then Sarah has to fight multiple crawlers, which ends in her victory. One of the most striking images from this film is Sarah rising from a dark pool, completely soaked in blood. Juno won't leave the cave without Sarah, which ends up being her undoing. When she, Rebecca, and Sam are chased by a group of crawlers, Sam dies when one tears into her throat, but she stabs one before bleeding out. Rebecca is dragged away, and the crawlers begin to eat her while she's still alive. Juno manages to escape, but then she and Sarah find each other again. Sarah confronts Juno about the affair with Paul, and she wounds Juno in the leg with a pickaxe before managing to flee the approaching crowd of hungry crawlers, the distant sounds of Juno's screams echoing in her ears. Sarah keeps moving, but falls down a hole and is knocked unconscious for the second time in this film, which is a bad amount of head trauma in real life, but a great way to further the plot of a horror movie. When she wakes up, she manages to find the exit the group was seeking. She hurries out into the sunlight, and even makes it to her car and starts driving before finally pulling over, throwing up out the window, and weeping. Then she sees the bloody figure of Juno sitting beside her, and Sarah wakes to find that she's still in the cave. She then sees her daughter Jessica, who of course died the year before, smiling at her as the sound of the crawlers approaching grows louder. Almost 20 years later, this film is a cult classic in the survival horror genre. While Sarah and Juno are the most well-developed characters, viewers will at least feel a shred of pity for the others. Here's a group of friends, maybe not that close, but close enough to take a trip together, who are doomed by Juno's poor choices, including her, arguably guilt-based, loyalty to Sarah. As a protagonist, Sarah is traumatized many times in this film, and you want her to escape in the end. But alas, just because a movie is technically survival horror doesn't mean that anyone actually survives. I give this film 4 corpses out of 6. Our next film is 2014's As Above, So Below. We first meet Scarlett, a driven scholar searching for information about Nicholas Flamel and the Philosopher's Stone when she sneaks into Iran. She records herself on the bus and explains that if she's killed, whoever finds her footage should know that she entered the country of her own free will, searching for a missing piece of human history in underground caverns that will be destroyed that night. Scarlett meets a family friend, Riza, and the two venture down into the caverns where they must avoid soldiers who are making sure the underground space is empty and ready for demolition. Eerie red light and blaring alarms are obvious to the viewer, but Riza leads Scarlett to a hidden stone carving that she quickly begins to chisel away at. Scarlett uses her small hammer to smash the stone, and behind the apparently false wall, she finds a huge black statue of a bull that she refers to as the Rose Key. Riza hurries back toward the surface, knowing that the detonation of the caverns is imminent. In recording the writing on the statue with her phone, Scarlett is nearly trapped in the rubble, but not before she records footage of a man hanging by his neck from the ceiling who whispers her name. When we next meet Scarlett, she is in Paris with a documentary filmmaker named Benji. Scarlett introduces herself and reveals that she is a university professor, is fluent in several languages, knows Krav Maga, and has continued her father's quest for the Philosopher's Stone. He was the world's foremost expert on its history since his death by suicide. Scarlett explains that Nicholas Flamel was a famed alchemist. His grave and his wife's were discovered to be empty hundreds of years ago by grave robbers, and now his headstone, which he designed, is in a museum. By using the Rose Key, Scarlett believes she can translate the symbols, provided she has help from someone who speaks Aramaic. This leads Scarlett and Benji to seek out her friend George. He is clearly interested in Scarlett and her quest, but is understandably miffed that the last time they did something together related to the Philosopher's Stone, he ended up in a Turkish prison. However, George agrees to help translate when he learns that Scarlett has found the Rose Key. Both of them seem to be the type of movie academics that have unlimited time for their areas of interest. In George's case, we learn that his hobby is sneaking into old churches to fix bell mechanisms in the clocks. George is able to get the trio into the museum after hours, where they can examine Nicholas Flamel's headstone. Scarlett, interpreting the clues translated by George, uses cleaning products from a nearby cart to reveal a hidden message on the back of the stone. After all, one of her PhDs is in chemistry. In the kind of code translation you only see in movies, Scarlett believes that the headstone can lead them to Flamel's tomb, and with George's help, they calculate where they need to start at the gates of hell, aka in the Paris catacombs. Benji and Scarlett take a tour of the catacombs, where a man appears just long enough to give them a tip about who to turn to if they want to explore a passage in secret, and then promptly disappears. Both Benji's camera and Scarlett's look of confusion emphasize that they know this is weird, but they're on a quest, so they ignore it because of course they do. Because this is a horror movie, but the characters think they're in an adventure movie. A man named Papillon and his friends Zed and Suxi agree to help Scarlett get into the catacombs and find the secret passage she's looking for. While the French trio handles the climbing gear, Benji gets people fitted with helmet cameras. All the while, George insists that he's not going with Scarlett. She tries to convince him that she'll need his help translating things, but he doesn't go underground. We soon learn that his younger brother drowned when George was a kid, and many parts of the catacombs are underwater. However, when the group makes it to the entrance they plan to use to enter the catacombs, they encounter police, and George, to escape arrest, follows the group into the tunnel. Soon, the group is hiking through partially submerged passages. Once they reach a drier space, The group finds that they aren't alone. There's a group of people singing a very creepy song. Papillon is unfazed. He insists that strange people sometimes hang out in the catacombs because tunnels filled with bones have a way of attracting certain kinds of people. Basically, hanging out illegally in the catacombs is a common enough problem that the police know about it, but there's over 200 miles of tunnels under Paris, so they obviously can't watch every potential entrance. The group's first real roadblock occurs when their route leads them through a very narrow passageway full of human bones. Benji has the unenviable position of being the most sensible person in this movie, and so he points out that this is a terrible situation, and is soon stuck in the passage, which is, as far as I can tell, a scene that legally has to appear in any movie involving tunnels and or caves. I didn't mention it, but there's one in The Descent too, so tread carefully if you have claustrophobia. A sudden collapse means that the group can't go the way Papillon wanted. Instead, they're forced to take the tunnel that he refused to consider initially, since when people go down that tunnel, they don't come back. When they make their way down this tunnel, they find Papillon's graffiti tag. Horrified, he insists that he's never been here. Then the group hears the sound of a phone ringing. They've entered a passage in which hundreds of people fell to their deaths many years before, and George is unsettled when he discovers a piano with the same broken key as the one his family owned when he was young. When Scarlett finally finds the ringing phone, she answers, only to hear what sounds like a distorted version of her dead father's voice. The next surprise comes when the group encounters a man named Lataupe, who Papillon says disappeared 2 years prior. Lataupe says he can lead them out, and he says, the only way out is down. Soon the group is rappelling down what looks to be a deep well. Benji's hands are injured when he experiences a sudden, unexplained drop. Please note, this is foreshadowing. A terrible noise is followed by the appearance, and just as sudden disappearance, of a small child, which seems to trouble Zed. When they reach the end of the tunnel, at the bottom of the well, there seems to be a dead end, until George points out a vulture carved into stone. This leads Scarlett to choose the correct stone in a nearby wall, which opens a secret passage. Inside is the body of Nicholas Flamel, perfectly preserved 700 years after his death, and in the adjoining chamber, which they reach by swimming through a short tunnel, there's a veritable hoard of gold. For Scarlett's part, she is overcome to find that the stone is real, and that she can finally prove her father right. She embraces George, then Benji, and Papillon and Suxi are ecstatic to see the pile of treasure. No one at this point has noticed that Lataupe is somehow perfectly dry. Scarlett is able to remove the Philosopher's Stone from the mural it was concealed in, just in time to see Papillon and the others go for the treasure, thus setting off a trap that collapses the roof. Suxi is injured, but fortunately, Scarlett uses the stone to heal the wound on her arm instantly. Now the group is once again trapped, though one could argue that they were pretty thoroughly trapped before. And to get out, they have to travel down deeper, through mirror images of what they've been through before. Scarlett also notes that, based on a diagram on the wall, they should be mindful of the phrase, as above, so below. She roughly translates this to mean that things on earth are as they are in heaven, and essentially, the world is as you believe it to be. From this point, the movie stops being adventure with horror elements and becomes sheer horror, since the group is moving through what appears to be an upper level of hell itself. What was water above is now, sometimes, blood. When a changed Lataupe attacks Suxi, bashing her head against stone until she dies, she can't be resurrected. The stone can heal, but it can't bring life to someone already dead. This is true for Benji, too, when he falls down a shaft after seeing the same woman he glimpsed in previous scenes. The group keeps descending, and Papillon, after seeing a burning car with someone sitting inside and insisting that it's not his fault, is suddenly buried alive with only his feet showing. Now it becomes clear that there might not be an exit after all, but Scarlett, George, and Zed keep moving. When George is injured, Scarlett finds that the stone no longer works, and she must retrace her steps to return it from the wall she took it from. Rather than a traditional Christian view of hell, the damnation that these characters face has to do with their own feelings of guilt. Scarlett blames herself for her father's death, just as George blames himself for his brother's death. Neither was really to blame, but Scarlett is finally freed from her grim visions when she apologizes to the hanging corpse of her father, embracing him and saying how she wished she'd answered his calls the night he died. Similarly, Zed saw a child because he has a child that he has not acknowledged as his own. Ultimately, Scarlett heals George because she believes she can. In confronting their feelings of guilt, the three manage to find a circular passage, just as the batteries on their headlamps begin to die. In jumping down it, they rectify themselves. And at the bottom, there's one last door in the floor. It's a manhole cover, and when the trio push upward, they exit onto a Parisian street at night. What was below is now above. And the three survivors of the underground ordeal embrace before Zed goes his own way, leaving Scarlett and George together. The movie ends with a brief scene of Scarlett, in the earlier interview with Benji, explaining that she doesn't want riches. She just wants to know the truth about the stone. Of course, the truth is that it's real, but so is a nightmarish subterranean realm that exists beneath the world we know. This isn't a good movie exactly, but it's a lot of fun, and I've enjoyed rewatching it more than once. The underground scenes are all appropriately creepy and claustrophobic, and I like the idea that hell is not so much a place, though it is also that in this film, but rather the unresolved feelings we carry with us, and the perception of having failed a loved one. I give this movie 3.5 skulls out of 5. Our book this month is This Wretched Valley, which was released in early 2024. I'll come back to the contents of Chapter 1, but in Chapter 2, we meet Clay, a college student getting his doctorate in geology. And his name is Clay, get it? Clay doesn't want to spend his career sitting behind a desk looking at rocks, though. Since he tore his ACL, he hasn't been able to climb like he used to, but he wants to scout new rock climbing locations. After all, climbing is a billion-dollar industry. So Clay thinks he's struck gold when, while out flying with a pilot friend, their LiDAR picks up a previously undiscovered rock wall in the forests of Kentucky. Now, you might be wondering, if this rock wall is tall enough to be worth climbing, why isn't it visible from the road or the nearby town? The answer is that this rock wall is located at the bottom of a valley. Seeing its potential, Clay calls on his friend Dylan, a skilled climber who's just earned a sponsorship deal with a rock climbing equipment company, and she brings along her boyfriend Luke to belay for her while she's climbing. Sylvia, a botany student friend of Clay's, rounds out the group of 4 humans and 1 dog. Slade comes along with Dylan and Luke. Almost as soon as they hike from the road to the valley, things get strange. Sylvia immediately notices that every plant in the area is poisonous. Dylan wonders why her phone works so well close to the rock wall. However, some weird electromagnetic phenomena is clearly at work, since sometimes phones don't work at all. The great thing in this story is that, for the main characters, these odd occurrences are features, not bugs. Sylvia is a botanist, so she's delighted to find a fungus called dead man's toes, which looks exactly how it sounds. For Clay and Dylan, this rock wall is their big break, a chance to further their careers, and every weird thing they notice is just another point of interest. And Luke is eager to support his girlfriend, until his dog Slade disappears after their first night at camp. From day 2 on, things get progressively worse for the group. Tempers flare at times, but even though Luke wants to leave to look for Slade, he agrees that getting lost won't help, and logically, the dog will probably return to the familiar sounds and smells of his humans once he gets hungry. However, this is a horror novel, so people being logical and calmly trying to work through their problems ultimately doesn't help. Then Luke is hurt when there's a mishap on the wall. Dylan has already felt that time doesn't always work right on this strange rock, and when she falls, Luke catches her, which is the whole job of the person belaying, but a broken rope causes Luke head trauma and a badly injured leg that will require medical attention. Naturally, when the group tries to leave the valley, they can't. Dylan and Clay manage to carry Luke, and Sylvia leads them with Clay's GPS. But somehow they walk in a circle. Of course, it's possible to get lost in dark woods at night, but this is something else. Clay sets out the next day alone, hoping to find help and a way out, and then he sees something that's impossible to logically explain away. There's a whole wagon train of people, dressed like they've appeared right out of the 19th century, and as he watches in horror, one woman soothes a crying infant by biting into its throat and drinking its blood. At this point, Clay starts drinking from a bottle of moonshine he found, which seems like the kind of choice that gets you killed in horror fiction, because it is. Something I thoroughly enjoy about this book is that, from the very first chapter, we know, at least in part, how things will end. The group sets out for the rock wall in March of 2019. In October 2019, 3 bodies are found. First is Sylvia's skeleton, which looks so perfect that at first it almost seems fake. But there are all the bones on the ground. None have been scavenged by animals, and no tendons or muscle tissue remain to connect them. Then there are the bodies of Luke and Clay. While Luke is missing internal organs, Clay is intact, save for his missing eyes, ears, nose, and fingertips. Odder still is the pinkish hue of their skin. They've been dead for months, but they don't look it. Medical examiners are baffled, and of course everyone wonders, where is Dylan? There's no sign of her, and it's as if she's vanished without a trace. If you're a fan of wilderness horror, check out this novel. I am sorry to say that at the time of this recording, I have a few chapters left, so I can't tell you if the dog, Slade, lives or not. I'm cautiously optimistic, though. In flashbacks, only humans seem to die horribly in the titular valley. If you like parts of the Blair Witch Project, namely the scary scenes at night, but thought the fighting, while realistic, got to be a bit much after a while, give this book a try. Travel is often treated as an intrinsically good idea. I would argue that, for many people, the time and expense involved in venturing outside one's comfort zone isn't always worth it. And if you're disturbing the dead or meddling in things you don't understand, there are plenty of horror movies and novels to demonstrate the worst-case results of thoughtless actions. All in all, I'd say that horror cautions us to listen to our instincts, trust your gut, and don't make rash choices just because you're on vacation. You may or may not live to regret it. Thanks for listening, and I'll be back again soon with another terrifying trio.